Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. My name is Niddiana Fakira binti Nid Jamili. I am from BA1194A. Today, I want to explain about counter trade, which is offset. What is counter trade? Counter trade is a reciprocal form of intentional trade in which goods or services are exchanged for other goods or services rather than for currency. This type of international trade is more common in developing countries with limited foreign exchange or credit facilities. Counter trade can be classified into 5 categories, which are barter, compensation, counter purchase, buyback, and offset. Counter trade is a system of international trading that help government reduce imbalance in trade between them and other countries. It involves the direct or indirect exchange of goods or other goods instead of currency. Counter trade is often used when a foreign country is in short supply or when a country applies foreign exchange controls, which are limits imposed on the availability of foreign currencies to importers for the purchase of foreign products. Counter trade is often used by developing countries to control trade and as a development technique. Counter trade can take several different forms. Each form can be used separately or in conjunction. What is offset? Offset is an agreement by one nation to buy a product from another, subject to the purchase of some or all of the components and raw materials from the buyer of the finished product or the assembly of such product in the buyer nation. Offset is a counter trade agreement in which a company offsets a hard currency purchase of an unspecified product from that nation in the future. For example, the seller exists in marketing products manufactured by the buying countries or allow part of the exported products assembly to be carried out by manufacturers in the buying country. This practice is common in aerospace, defense and certain infrastructure industries. Offsetting is also more common for larger, more expensive items. An offset agreement may also be referred to as industrial participation or industrial cooperation. This defines offset as mandatory compensation required by foreign governments when purchasing weapon systems and services. The US government underlines a compulsory aspect of this trade practice since the United States, with other weapon exporting countries such as Germany and France, opposes offset as form of protectionism and harmful transgression of free market rules. These governments front on offset agreements consider them to be both market distorting and inefficient. As an example of a defense offset proposal, we could describe a hypothetical cases of Nation P buying 300 tanks from defense company S. The total sale contract is $400 million in Nation P. Request offset of 120% defense company S is obligated to fulfill an offset at equal to 120% of the sale contract, that is $480 million. Nation P agrees on a list of specific offset deals and program to fulfill the agreed total obligation with Company S. The offset agreement includes both direct and indirect offset. Nation P also assigns a credit value for each type of offset offered by Company S. The credit value for the offset obligation is not the actual value, but it is the actual value by a multiplier that expresses the degree of interest of Nation P in the proposed offset. In other words, something deemed very valuable by nation people have a high multiplier that expresses the importance and the value to Nation P of the type of offset. The multiplier translates Nation P's attached value into the credit value that eventually accounts for the fulfillment of the agreed sum of $480 million. It is evident, but with no multipliers. 120% offset would be nonsense. Most of the offset packages are divided into direct and indirect offset. Direct offset is a set agreement that is directly related to the main product or service that is bought or sold, that is military equipment, system or services. They may be also called military offset. When some components of the item sold are to be manufactured within the buyer's countries and that the seller agrees to buy those components to use them in-house. Direct offsets are products or services which the government or a provider within the target country will sell back to the defence contractor under the sale contract, concurrently with the primary purchase by the government from the contractor. For example, an aircraft manufacturer sells a passenger plane to a buyer in another country and agrees with the buyer that some of the spare parts of the plane will be ordered and purchased in buyer's country and attached to the plane. A direct offset occurs when a seller of a product to be imported into a foreign country agrees to purchase part or material used to produce the product. The direct offset will effectively reduce the price of the imported goods because of the profit earned by the local foreign company selling components to the seller. Keep in mind that the objective here is to improve trade imbalances between exporting and importing countries. Consequently, the purchasers of the foreign good doesn't necessarily benefit from the direct offset, but the economy of the foreign country does. Let's say you are a defense contractor that is authorized to sell arms to an ally of your government. One of the potential customers is a small country in Eastern Europe that's interested in buying some tanks. The foreign country agrees to buy a battalion worth of tanks from your company so long as you buy the steel used to make the tank from one of its steel firms. You agree with the deal and start rolling out the tanks. Indirect offsets are set agreements that are not directly related to the product or service that is bought or sold. When the buyer requires the seller to enter into a long-term industrial or other cooperation and investment, but this cooperation or investment is not related to goods supplied by the seller. Indirect offsets are products or services desired by the government which the contractor does not itself produce. For example, an aircraft manufacturer sells a passenger plane to a buyer in another country. The seller agrees to invest in a chipboard factory in buyer's countries, whereby the chipboard is not related to passenger plane. The idea behind an indirect offset is the same as a direct offset, but the offset doesn't involve the same trade transaction. An indirect offset occurs when a foreign government requires an importer to make a long-term investment in the country's economies. A common example may be the construction of a factory in the country which will create jobs and help build the country's economies. Why counter trade? It is because shortage of hard currency, lack of credit, BOP problems, low commodity prices, which is low export income, surplus capacity, armed trade, lack of well-developed private sector, and lack of international trading experience. What are the benefits of counter trade? Benefits of counter trade are allow entry into difficult markets, increases company sales, overcome currency controls and exchange problems, increases sale value, overcome credit difficulties, allow fuller use of capacity, allow disposal of declining product, provide sources of attractive input, and gain competitive edge over competition. What are the disadvantages of counter trade? Disadvantages of counter trade are no in-house use of goods offered by customer, time-consuming and complex negotiation, uncertainty, increased costs, getting businesses in which firm may have no knowledge, and risky if commodities are involved. Now, let me explain about pros and cons of counter trade. Pros of counter trade. Regardless of the complexity, companies still use counter trade as a strategy for growth because it allows for entry into difficult markets, increases company sale where you might not otherwise have business, overcome credit difficulties, allow for disposal of declining or surplus products, and gain competitive advantage over competition, which is you don't want to lose a market share as a result of competitors. For cons of counter trade is disadvantage to counter trade is that the value of a deal, the goods being exchanged, may be uncertain, causing significant price volatility. Other disadvantages include, but are not limited to, first, time consuming, which is as is any unconventional tactic, there will be haggling over the good trades, so expect a long, drawn out negotiation until all parties are satisfied. Second, complexity in the nature of the negotiation. What should you do with the goods being offered? Third, higher transaction costs, including brokerage. For instance, costs can quickly add up, especially while looking for a buyer for the goods, commissions to middlemen, and so forth. Fourth, logistical issues, especially if communities are involved. Last but not least, greater uncertainty on the value of the goods being traded and uncertainty on the quality of the goods. I think that's all from me. Thank you.